Hi, everyone. I'm here, Michael Rubino, with another Mold Talks. And today I have a very special guest. Her name is Samantha. Samantha, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and let everyone know why you're here?
Okay, so I just saw Michael's Mold Medic page a while back, and I thought, well, I have a story to tell about kind of a mold, what I've gone through. So I thought if I could share my story, it could kind of help some others that maybe didn't think, because I thought mine was like an autoimmune or something different, and then it ended up coming down to, after all these tests, it ended up coming down to mold and mold infection.
Okay, so let's dive into that. So before you got all these tests done, what happened? I mean, did you move into a new place? Did you have a big water damage event? What kind of happened that led you down this path?
Well, we're military, so we move every couple of years. And so we had just come from Washington. So we'd come from Hawaii, which is, well, I'm not complaining, but that's a very moldy area. Then we moved to Washington State, also a very moldy area. And then we moved to California to specifically to like the Monterey area, and also kind of a little bit like the Pacific Northwest with the moldy rain, and we lived like a couple blocks, not complaining, but we lived a couple blocks from the ocean, which was nice. But then we lived in an older home from like 1948 that had been probably not, like properly sealed up. And so it was, there was mold, but I didn't, like at the time we moved in the end of 2017, I didn't think anything of it. I just thought it's just an older home. It has a little bit of a weird smell, but it wasn't anything. I didn't know that. I didn't realize how mold can affect your body, basically. So I just kind of like, it's not a big deal. And then I would see things like they painted the house. So they must have put some sort of, and I'm not like, saying whatever, like obviously it's like something looks unsightly. A lot of landlords will just paint over it. And we were only in California for my husband to go to graduate school. So it was just 2 years. So it was like, we're not going to buy a house, and especially not in California. So it was kind of like, we moved in this house. It was all great. Everything looked white and clean. And then over time, like the ceiling in the bedroom that used to be a garage, I don't think it was properly, put on there or sealed. And it was literally like spots all over the ceiling. And I should have like immediately said red flag. But again, I was kind of like, oh, we'll just really dumb. Like, I'll just clean it off, which is, I know you said not to do, especially with like bleach and stuff. So I was just like releasing all these spores, and my husband slept in the same room, the same bed, but he went off to school, and he was like, he wasn't affected at all. Like there was no symptoms for him.
Okay.
So that was kind of how it started.
So first off, I want to thank you guys for your service. Really appreciate, everything you do for the country. It's disheartening to hear kind of this little story of how you've kind of been impacted by mold in various different locations. At this point, you had no idea that it was impacting you, right?
No, because I mean, I wasn't like, I won't say that I was like in perfect health when I got there. Like obviously we all have things we could work on. And I had just had like my fourth child a year prior. And so like I was still like, had like a very young child. I was still trying to kind of keep up with all the other kids. And so I wasn't in perfect health, but you could tell there was a drastic difference. So it actually took a while. So I know I was, somewhat healthy because, and I've always been really like into like the more natural, just like, natural medicine and like natural, just trying to be like a healthy person, but I wasn't. It took a while for it to take me down, is what I'm saying. It took a while. Like, I think my immune system kept trying to fight. And then what ended up being the kind of like just kind of the ending, like the breaking point, was I had a infected root canal that was finally just, those are a whole nother topic. Very, can be very bad as well. And that kind of pushed me over the edge between the mold and then the tooth infected. My body was like, I'm done. So it took until the end of 2018, almost another whole year. And it happened in the winter time, which I think is because the house was closed up and then we turned the heat on. So it's for sure in the HVAC. It was for sure in the HVAC. And then I started to notice things, but like I said, it was like, I was kind of just like ignorant about it. Like, oh, this is just something I need to clean. It's kind of ugly, but it's not something that's really affecting me. And like the blinds in the master bedroom, they had like, on the one side, they looked fine. But towards the end, I would like pull them back and I was like, wow, like this is like, I'm sitting here sleeping and breathing this in all night long. And so then that's when the symptoms started, like the end of 2018. They started to like, I'm, you know, most people are anxious, you know, like we have some worries or whatever, but like I've always had a little bit of anxiety and stuff. And so I would, you know, do my normal things like, and, you know, I'd meditate or do yoga or whatever, and nothing would touch it. It was like an extreme anxiety, borderline. I would say, I don't want to like diagnose myself because I, you know, whatever, but I was depressed. I mean, it was getting to the point of like, I just wanted to go to sleep at 7 o'clock at night so that I could just, because I was so anxious, I just wanted to go to bed after the kids went to bed. So I was so tired and anxious. And I had like random, like muscle twinges and like spasms. And it was kind of just like, that was like those were not as serious. When I felt like I couldn't breathe, that just, all that did was like feed that anxiety. And so my throat felt like it was always like almost someone was like, I don't want to say like choking me, but it felt that tight.
Like
it felt
pressure,
like,
yeah.
yes. And I felt like I always had mucus going on, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. And so then all those things is like a bad combination of like, you're just more anxiety because, and I didn't know why. I was like, what is wrong? Yeah, the throatitis. I wrote some of these down. Yeah, brain fog, and just overall didn't feel well. I just was like, I'm not normally like this. I can usually pull myself out of these things. And then, so I started going to see doctors, and I actually went into the emergency room on Christmas Day of 2018, because I was having this, like, you know, like people have had anxiety attacks, you say panic attacks. This was like, it lasted for all day. Like it wouldn't go away. And I thought I was seriously having some sort of heart thing. I was like, this is it. Thought I was dying. So I went to the emergency room, and the doctor was like, well, your heart's fine. And he was actually very compassionate. A lot of doctors could have just been like, no, you're just fine and just go home. But he was actually like, you know, these are really scary events. He called it something, and I'm going to totally butcher vasovega or vaso, like your vagus nerve. It's like some sort of reaction. And he thought it was because they had given me antibiotics, which I hadn't taken in like over a decade, for the tubes. So he said, get off of those. You don't have any issue with that. Like, just get off of those. Obviously it's affecting you some way. So I got off of that, went home. And then after that, it just continued to get worse. And I kept going to see, because at the time it was Christmas time, holiday time, right, and people weren't there. So I'd go to these walk-in clinics, and I'm like, something isn't right. Like, somebody needs to tell me. So they'd be like, okay, we'll go get this blood work done, And finally, this one in January of 2019, I went into this place in California, and the lady was like, okay, well, I was like, what's wrong with me? You know, I was thinking like something severely wrong. My kidneys, like, what is happening? And she's like, well, I think, so started going down the thyroid path and saying, you know, well, I think there's a thyroid issue. And then finally they tested for antibodies, and my antibodies were up, and they said, well, I think you have Hashimotos. And I ended up being like, okay, so that's not good. And I just didn't really think, you know, I kept telling this naturopath. I ended up finding a naturopath. I thought she would listen. Didn't really listen about the mold. I was like, I swear it's the mold. And this was like the spring of 2019 by that point. And she was like, well, it could be. Never ordered a test, never really, just told me I had low iron, take some more iron. I'm like, I got something else going on. So I don't even know how many times I had my blood drawn in 2019. Like I think at least over a dozen plus, I mean, maybe 20 times. It was quite an event. And then by the time I went through all those emergency clinics and the doctors that I I was seeking out, it was like probably around 10 doctors that I had talked to, or like physician's assistants, that type of thing. And finally, in June of 2019, when we were driving, because we moved from California to North Carolina, and on the way, I found this functional medicine doctor that I was recommended in Utah, and I stopped there. And he at first did the same, like, blood stuff, like, let's just look at your vitamins. And I'm like, I'm telling you it's something else, and no one's listening, you know? And I'm like, I can't just cover this up. If I just take a pill to cover this up, it's just going to keep going and going, because something's not right. And he said, finally in September, like September 2019, he did my first blood work, and then he just said the same thing. We got to look at your iron. I'm like, I don't need any more iron. I need some help. Something is not right. I did feel better when I left that house. I will say that the June of 2019, when I drove away from that house, that first week out of that house, I did feel a relief of some of the immediate symptoms, but still was just like unwell, not something wasn't right. And so then he was like, I told him in like August, I said, I had mold in that house. And he goes, and I mentioned it the first visit too. And he just didn't really seem like it was a thing. And then when I said it again in like August, he goes, hey, maybe we should look into that. And I was like, yes, this is what I've been telling you people. I need someone to look into this. So he ordered a test through I'm sure you've heard about this a lot before, the Great Plains Laboratory. Yep. And he sent it back. So it came back on 9/9/2019, or that was the one that was collected, 9/9/2019. And so I'm probably going to butcher these as well, but I had a little bit of elevated of the aspergillus. Is that how you say that?
Aspergillus.
Ochre toxin was a little elevated, but it was the penicillium. Is that right? Penicillium. Yep. And it was the mycophenolic acid.
Mycophenolic acid. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like an average person, this ended up changing. Their sensitivities ended up changing after this test, but they were saying like an average, like a common range of positive. I just printed them because I was like, well, I'm going to definitely butcher the names if I can't see them. So it said 5 to 50 was like a normal and range or whatever. And mine was 567.86.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, finally someone listened to me. So that's kind of where I'll let you go to the next, if you have another question after that, but I can just tell you what happened after that whenever.
So this was years in the making, right?
Yes.
So you were basically, it took a little while for your system to kind of acclimate to your environment, where eventually it just started to overload your immune system. You started getting sick. Yeah. From there, you saw countless doctors all over the country, it seems, who just went down the normal path of let's check your vitamins, your minerals, your hormones, et cetera, and didn't really check to see if there was any environmental exposures. Then you finally found someone. Yeah. And I'm guessing that's really where your healing journey starts, in conjunction with moving from that house. Yeah. So let's hear the next steps.
So then he was like, yeah, that's not good. Obviously, like that's way too high. And that's something we need to look at. And so immediately, so that was September. And then we prepared basically for October to then start this mold detox. And it wasn't necessarily like, I'd have to pull all the stuff up, but it was a lot of those like detox ones, like from like the Cellcore, the biosciences one, or they, a lot of just like, he had a very tailored. And so that's why when people ask me, they're like, well, I've had a mold thing and what would you do? It's like, I don't, like, you know what I mean? I'm not a doctor, and like, you'd have to see this person to get that. But it's like, he knew that we needed to pull this stuff out, but also starting something like this, and I'm sure you're familiar with that, is like starting something like this, you're not going to feel well. You know, like it's going to be like a flu that kind of goes on for a little bit, because you're pulling things out that are, and especially it was pulling other things out, not just the mold, but, you know, heavy metals or whatever. So you're going to feel a little bit like, you know, and so for someone that's already anxious and in this position of, I don't feel well, and then you're telling me I'm going to feel worse, but I know it's going to get better. And I was so scared to put different things. Like I was like, okay, if ever I had to start a new vitamin routine, I was like, oh my gosh, you're like rocking the boat here. You know what I mean?
Totally.
So started it in October, and I was like, okay, here we go. And like, I have the 4 kids, and we're military, so we don't have family around. Luckily I had like a helper, like almost like, she wasn't a nanny, but she would come over, and I'd have to go to the local gym, and I'd go in the infrared sauna. And that was a part of the protocols. I had to just like sweat it out, because obviously, and then I had all these, you know, kind of like, stacked, like, so like the detox started like this, and then it just kept ramping up.
Yeah, on a gradient.
Different levels. And that went from October of 2019 all the way into April of 2020. So it was a long while. Time. Yeah. And then when everything shut down in March of 2020, the gym shut down, obviously. And so I got a sauna right in my garage. I was like, I can't stop. And now I still go there. It's more even just for like just to have some peace, like from the kids, and it's just like a little like sanctuary. So there is a blessing. There's blessings out of bad situations, but it wasn't during the time, that first part, that October, I was just like, I was almost like in a movie. Like I just was kind of like, my head just felt like I was in a cloud, like I'm trying to do this stuff, but I feel like, and so I knew, I know I really needed that, even beyond just the mold. We all have things in our, that.
Yeah. We live in a toxic world.
Yeah. And so it was good, but it was also just scary because like, okay, I just have to get through this, just get through this. And then when he'd say, okay, now here it's February of 2020. Now you need to like, okay, we're switching over to the stage 3 of it. And now it's going to be a little bit different. And you might feel those symptoms again. I'm like, oh, I don't want, you're just like,
no. It is mentally taxing. I mean, I'm doing a detox program right now, actually. And, I sitting in that sauna, lots of things will turn on. Anxiety. I've had like weird like skin reactions because stuff's coming out of my skin and it's itchy and it's uncomfortable. It's unfortunately, in healing is just kind of like, and this is both physically and mentally, right? You have to really break through the uncomfortability of things to get to where you want to go. It's kind of like you're going through this tunnel and there's a light at the other side, and that's what keeps you going, right? That light at the other side of the tunnel. But going through the tunnel, it's dark and it's scary and it's uncomfortable. And that's what healing is like, unfortunately. And it probably wouldn't be like that if we knew a lot more about our environment, the impacts our environment, how important something like detoxing is. So last time I did any detox was 7 years ago. So, I was shocked just because of how aware I am, like how much I'm going through, in 7 years. And I guess it's a long time and I need to probably shorten that, of course. But even me, I was just so confused as to how much accumulation can really happen in my body. And for what to me seemed like a short amount of time, considering of how careful I am. But it just goes to show us that this is a toxic world. And, there's a lot of stuff that fills up our toxic load, including mold and bacteria and plastics and all these other things. So when our environment is not in a place where we can really heal, it's almost impossible to do so. So you ended up moving to this place in North Carolina. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And we've been here almost, be 3 years, like 3 years here soon. And it's been just like a nice, safe, it was a newer home and there could be mold in there too, but it just made me feel better that I was in the kind of like a fresh environment. And we're about to move again. And so it's like, I was looking at like older homes and I'm like, I just can't, I know you can test for mold and stuff like that, but I know that there can be in new construction too, but just kind of, now I'm very like sensitive to it and I don't ever want to go back to that. And I think that a lot of people don't. Oh, just to rewind a second. So the Hashimoto's thing ended up basically being reversed. When people say that you can't reverse autoimmune stuff, like the reason it was flaring is because I had this mold and it thought it should attack it. So what I'm saying, when people tell me you can't do that, yes, you can. You can, your body is telling you something, it's giving you a message. And so, but anyways, back to the story is that,
awesome.
You have to be careful. You have to be careful with, and people like, family and friends were kind of like, what, mold? You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. Like, like you're moldy. I'm like, no, it's just like I said before, my husband was in that same environment, but he was gone a lot of the day. At grad school, and he would get out and he would make sure to make it a priority to work out, which is, as people think, oh, people are just because they want to look physically, they want to look good physically. No, working out, what I've learned, at least with supplements and stuff, a lot of what the mold does is goes into your mucous membranes and strips everything out, and so then you have all those immune functions that are not working, your liver's not functioning. And so like things like the glutathione that's naturally produced, with the working out and kind of like a healthy lifestyle, but it starts to naturally deplete after we're 40. And I would never have known that. So like, even though this has been not fun, it was not fun. It was a lot of money. There was a lot of money put into it. And you sound a little crazy when you say mold, but But if you feel like you've gone to the doctor, they're just saying, I don't know, like could be just autoimmune, because everybody seems to have autoimmune nowadays. And like it's just that's what it is. You take medication for your anxiety and then that's it. If your gut is telling you, no, there is something else here, then I would look into, I mean, it could be your house. If, like you said, have you moved, like you asked me, have you moved lately? Do you have a water damage? Did you have a water damage event? I mean, there really could be, and people might not know. And like you said, it could build over time. I think in me, it built like all those, and don't even get me started with the military housing with the mold. Like I won't live on base anymore, because there's groups that are on, I've seen them on like Facebook and stuff. And all they talk about is just like all these housing, they don't take care of, they just bandage it, they paint it, they bleach it. And then people get sick, and really, really sick, and they don't, and like kids too, and they don't, they have no idea.
Certainly it's a real problem, and one we have to face, because obviously we want our military to be protected. So when you moved to North Carolina and you started seeing this doctor, you started to heal, but obviously you were talking to friends and family once you kind of figured that out. How difficult was it talking to friends and family and trying to get them to understand, about what you were going through? Was there some conflict there?
Yeah. And I think even like, so like my extended family and friends, that was kind of because I was trying to share it publicly, like, because I wanted to let other people know that this is hard, because people are like, again, like if they haven't gone through it, I have had like probably a handful of people have their friends reach out that have had maybe similar symptoms and say, well, what did you do? But again, like, I can't tell you exactly what. I can tell you, like, get out of there. I can tell you kind of basic stuff, but like the sauna and stuff like that, but they need to kind of have like a protocol themselves. But my husband even like was kind of at first, like, cause I always was like, like a healthy person. And then what the heck is like, what is going on with you? So I think when I got the numbers back on the test, and I was like, look, there is like you can see it, because you kind of do feel a little bit like isolated, because you're like, I know something's wrong. I don't have anything to prove it. I look physically fine on the outside. I look like I'm a normal, there's nothing going on, but on the inside, something's off. And so once I had the results, I felt like, okay, I at least have that to go on. And then people were like, wow, because I would tell them like I told you guys, the penicillium, it was this high and it should have only been, or it shouldn't have been at all, or very little, you know what I mean? It should have been 100. And so then that kind of helped the conversation. But even some of my own father was kind of like, wait, like no, like, and so my sister was also having a significant health issue, but hers is something that you could see. And and it was like a surgery thing. And so I felt kind of like I had to kind of stay quiet about it, because I was like, well, I don't want to try to, or I don't want to seem like, oh, I'm trying to have a problem, because you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Trying to minimize my problem, but mine, it was like all encompassing, and it was hard for me, because I felt like, and now I know other people, I think about it on the other end of this, that when I was in the thick of this, if I could help somebody pull them through to the other side and say like, look, this will get better. Because I didn't believe, like, I was like, this is just going to be how it is now. And it feels very, very scary to not know if this is going to end.
100%. Yeah. And, you make a good point. Like you said that with your sister, you could visibly see it. And in most cases you can't, right? I mean, you did see some specks on the garage ceiling, but, in the HVAC, you don't see that, and there's no real signs of it when it's coming out of the HVAC. Sometimes it doesn't even create a smell, right? So it can be very confusing and misleading, and leave you kind of wondering, could it be mold? And, I'm glad that you ended up finding someone that was willing to check you. And obviously from that, you were able to learn what it was. And now you can do something about it, right? And so you've reversed Hashimoto's, which is amazing. Congratulations. You're on this path to healing. I hope that your new place you move into is perfect, because it sounds like you're going to be making a move soon. But it looks like you're now really aware that your environment can create an impact to your health, and you've become cause over it instead of an effect of it. And that's the key, right? It's like we have to shift our mindset to being cause over it, right? Because for most people, we move in, we get sick, we're the effect of it.
Yeah.
And there is something you can do about it. So I do really appreciate the sentiment there.
Yeah. Yep. It's
And
just,
so how are you doing now?
I mean, obviously, like there's always things I feel like you know what I mean? Like you could work on. And I feel like the next kind of hurdle is just like, I think it did have something, it messed with my gut more than you know what I mean? I think there's
Sure.
still more there, and like just absorbing the, you know, when you do, you know, take vitamins and absorbing the nutrients, it did mess with it. So there's more I can do. And I'm still actually actively working with this doctor to kind of make sure everything is, because I'm kind of almost anxious to let him go. So, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Because it's like one of those things like, no, I still want to kind of keep up with you, because I just,
Yeah.
if something starts to happen again, I don't, because there could still, so I did a second mold test following this one in like January 2020. And they had increased their sensitivity, like, so they made it so that like they could detect even more mold. So it looked like my number might have gone up on one of them, but then it gone like, say, down to like into like the hundreds or lower on that one that was 500. And so I kind of got freaked out. And he goes, oh no, they contacted me. It's like a sensitivity thing. They changed their like testing. And I was like, and he's like, do you want to do a third one like after in April or May of 2020? And I was like, honestly, I don't. Because I know how my symptoms feel, and I don't feel that way anymore. And I don't want to sit here and dwell on every little number. Because if I know there's any mold left, then it's going to kind of trigger something in my brain. And the same thing with blood work. He wants to do more blood work, and I keep putting it off. And it's because I'm just like, I live so closely with the like labs and blood work, and it's just so, it was so tight, you know what I mean? Like I just was so wrapped around that idea of like, oh my gosh, I have to get the next blood work, and I got to take this, you know, this detox and this pill. And I had such a schedule. I had to write stuff. I mean, it was just a stressful time. And so now I'm kind of like, I'm like trying to remove myself from that, but I also need to stick with it, because you don't want to.
Yeah, no, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because, you know, there's so many people that they start to feel better, they start to do better, you know, and there's a PTSD that sets in, right? And it can cause a lot of anxiety and unnecessary worry. You always want to be aware of things. You always want to take the right measures, but you don't want to overdo it, because overdoing it, you're going to obviously get to this state where your mental health is going to suffer, you know? And so once you get your physio health back, you don't want to kind of start to wonder, you know, about all these other things, especially if you're feeling good, right? And you do another test and maybe they're nominally elevated. If you don't feel that you're going to be able to handle that well, and that you may like start driving yourself crazy, don't do it, you know, and go off of what you feel. So these tests are supposed to be diagnostics to help kind of identify problems so you can do something about it, right? You want to take the information and put it into action, but you don't want to use the information to be hard on yourself, right? And I think that's the key. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think it highlights a special point with most people. You know, they have struggle with that, right? So
well, a lot of people, and I also have to tell myself too, is like, when you're like so focused in, like laser focused in on like, okay, what's that blood result going to say? What's the mold test going to say? And then you think about it, and I think about other people and my family and just people, my friends and stuff like that. I'm like, nobody does these types of blood tests, or like really says, well, why? And goes to the next level and scrutinizes over every little detail. And, oh, why did that go up one? Or why did that go down one? Or whatever. Most people just do the bare minimum. And the fact that I'm even trying to see this is good, but I also can't be so fixated like on the number, you know what I mean? Because
no, you're right.
What it is. You get like in this like, and you just want to be better. And then it's like, and then you're scared to look at the results, because you're like, oh, what if it says this again? You know what I mean? Then I had to get to a point where it's okay if it says that again. You're going to be okay if it says that. You're going to have to deal with it if it says that again. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it was a lesson like much bigger. And I'm honestly like, it sounds weird to say it now, but I'm glad that I had to go through it, because a lot of stuff is a lot of good things, like talking to you. Would I have ever talked to you? No. Would I
probably not?
No.
Yeah.
because
No, it's good. And now you're better off for it. You're aware. You can control your surroundings better because you know what to look for. What's interesting about what you said.
yeah,
Yeah, of course. What's interesting about what you said is there's tests for the home too, as you know, right? And that's kind of my realm of things. But there's something called the ERMI. I'm sure you've heard of it. The ERMI is a PCR test. It tests the dust and it sees what environmental
yes, I've
contaminants are in
heard
the
that.
dust, right? So we'll have people that'll call me for consults, and I'll be on the phone with them or Zoom or whatever, and they'll be like, "Well, this ERMI isn't perfect." And I'll look at it and I'll be like, yeah, you're right. It's not perfect, but it's really good. I mean, compared to where you came from,
Yeah,
I would, the thing about ERMI is like, as long as the sources are not there, it'll continue to improve. The more you clean, just over
yeah,
time, it's just going to keep going lower and lower. So I'm like, everything looks great. This is all tracking downwards. Keep doing what you're doing. And they were just like, well, shouldn't I be concerned about this? I'm like, well, how do you feel? Well, I feel great. I feel so much better. Good. So don't beat yourself up over it. You
yeah,
you can't. Perfection is something that you strive for. It's not
yeah,
really something you ever get to achieve, right? And I think that's the misconception just about the word perfection in the first place. We strive for perfection, but we don't ever get there. But as long as we continue to strive for it,
yep,
we'll always get as close as we need to. And that's
yep,
how that works. And so with anyone dealing with mold in their home, strive for perfection. Do everything you can, but know that you'll never ever get perfection, and guess what? You don't need it to heal. You just
right,
need better. You have too much overloading your immune system. You need to reduce it all around holistically, in the environment, in your diet, overall healthier, right? And by taking action, you're going to get results. And that's what it comes down to. So no, I'm so glad you brought all that up and we're able to kind of tie all that in together.
yeah. It's the same kind of thing. Like, yeah, you're not going to get all the mold out of your body. And we live in, there is mold everywhere. And I've come to be aware of that, especially North Carolina is a very moldy area. Like there's just
Totally.
mold, everywhere's moldy. I mean, so it's just, you just have to kind of figure out, obviously keep your house safe because you're in there all the time. And interesting is like with the indoor air quality, you'd think you'd be, better off inside your home, but a lot of times with all the junk, it's
Totally. I mean, it could be 50 to 100 times, more toxic inside than outside. And that's
yeah,
what that and when it gets to that level, that's when we start to not feel well, right? Because every breath we take, we're having all these indoor contaminants coming
yeah,
into our body, and that's not happening outside, right? There's a lot more volume of air outside.
yep,
So it's important to not have these, drastic issues take place inside of our homes that could make us sick. So we do need to be aware of it,
yeah,
but we need to just take action and do what we can,
yeah,
and it all will fall into place as long as you have, good support system.
yeah,
For you, you had a good doctor, you had a great family to support you. You need a good support system. For some people, they're remediating.
yeah.
You need a good, company to work with to test and identify where the problems are, a good remediator to fix them. You put together a good team, and you take action, and you will prevail, right? And I think that's the key here.
I think it's a lot more prevalent too. Then that's the other thing that I realized too. Like just with people, a lot of people are having these symptoms and they can't explain them. And
Yeah.
I just would hate for people to just mask them because I know that. I mean, I don't want to say I don't know like what would have continued to happen. Like if my body, I would it have continued to get
Yeah.
worse and worse. I don't know that. So you can kind of play that. Well, what if game? But it's like,
Yeah, well, you don't know
don't
because you didn't let it. You didn't
yeah,
let it get to that point, and for anybody listening, you shouldn't let it get to that point either, and I think that's really important, is like, if you know something's wrong and you're going to doctors and they're not giving you the answers that you're looking for, like basically they're coming up empty-handed, find someone who
that's
can
exactly what
really
I was
look
just gonna say.
yeah,
Yep.
find someone who can look at a larger sphere, right?
Right.
Because sometimes these doctors, they just go down a narrow path. It's just the path that they're comfortable in. It's what they typically look for. And
Fine. They're
sometimes what you're dealing with is not inside that path, and you need to
right.
find someone who has a wider path, right? And that's kind of the name of the game. So question for you, what if there was like one thing that you could recommend to others who may be dealing with similar situations as yourself, what would be the one thing that you would recommend to them to make the most impact?
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of like, it's hard to say just one thing, but like, I think, you know, you hear this a lot, is just like, get out of the environment, or, you know what I mean? Fix it. And if you can't get out of it, fix it. Cause I think that like, if you try to treat those symptoms and then you don't ever leave that environment, then it's like the same thing is just going to keep happening. So I know that's not helpful, because not everybody can leave, but obviously if you can leave, or you can have it, like say if you're renting the house, get out of the house. If you're, you know, if you can go stay with a family member, go stay with a family member, have it fixed. I know this all costs money, but it's like, I think that it's one of those things that it's just so important that you need to get out of that environment, and then you can start to really, or fix it or leave, whatever. If you own the house, it's, you know, easier said than done. Just to be like, I own this house, I can't leave, I need this to be fixed.
Of course.
But maybe, you know, like this, you're going to have to invest in yourself. I know you're going to have to like look at, invest in your house, but also invest in yourself. I mean, you're gonna have to start looking at where your budget is, and like, you know, cutting things that aren't important. Like, you know, if you go to Starbucks every day, like that's not important. Like, you know, get a good air purifier, you know, get a gym membership and go to a sauna, buy a sauna. They're actually not that, you know, if from Costco, I got a really good, I mean, you can get a decent sauna for $1,000, which sounds like a lot, but you're investing in your life, you know? And so I think all these things that I would never have done. And then just, taking care of yourself. And then if something is off, the doctor works for you. So if the doctor is not addressing, that's my big thing. Kind of what you just said. It's like, if they're not telling you anything, and they're not willing, and they also, if they're making you feel like you're a little bit, you know, crazy for talking like this, then they're not the doctor for you. And you might have to try out a bunch of them. That's just, it's a long process, but I promise it'll be worth it in the end to find one that actually listens to you.
Yeah, no, it's so invaluable. Thank you so much for those amazing tips. You know, I really appreciate our time together here today, and really appreciate you coming on and taking time out of your day to share your story with others. I know it's going to help, you know, and I know we're really trying to just show everybody that this happens to all of us. So Samantha, thank you very much. Where can people find you if they wanted to reach out and ask a question, or, you know, have you as an ally to support them?
Yeah, I'm just on Instagram, just Samantha Huddleston. That's it.
Very simple.
Huddleston. Yeah, it's just my name.
All right, perfect.
Yeah, but thank you for everything that you're doing too. This is really important. And when I saw you, I was like, oh my gosh. And so I'd love to help out in any way, you know, just to spread, I mean, somehow just to help spread the message, because I just don't think people understand the depths of this, and that it can be really bad. And there's a lot of people that are struggling and they don't know why. And the more we can get this out here, that, you know, this could be something that is affecting you, is important.
You're exactly right. And that's why we're here today doing this, you know, so that other people can really see the depths of this and start to understand the process. And I just want to thank you and your husband again for your guys' service. Really appreciate that, and hope to talk soon.
Yep. Thank you.